G'day humans, Chris Stead here. Today, I'm comparing the two big new entries in the premium high-end VR headset space. It's the Apple Vision Pro versus the Pimax Crystal Super. So there's always a lot going on in the virtual reality headset space, but two of the big kind of deals in 2024 is the release of the Apple Vision Pro, so Apple's first kind of foray into the virtual reality, mixed reality, AR space. The Apple Vision Pro with the Vision OS system. And then we've got the Pimax brand, which is also already a big player in the premium high-end virtual reality space, announced two new headsets for this year. There's the Crystal Lite and there is the Crystal Super. Now I've done a separate video comparing those two particular headsets against each other, so make sure you check that out if you want to work out what the difference is between the Lite and the Super. However, the Super, as you might guess from the name, is the new highest of high ends in the Pimax range. So it's going to go up against the Apple Vision Pro for consumer dollars and definitely in terms of interest in what you can get, especially when we dive into the specs which we're about to do. Now they're not exactly like for like. While the Pimax Crystal Super is hyper-focused on the PC VR experience, the Apple Vision Pro is something else altogether. They don't even want to call it a VR headset, they want to call it spatial computing. But it's like a mixed reality, an XR, an MR. It's got AR and it's got VR, lots of Rs. It's got virtual reality, it's got augmented reality, it's got a lot of productivity-based experiences and a lot of augmented reality experiences. And it's only kind of just starting to touch into what its capabilities are from a VR headset. We're starting to see it find ways to basically stream Steam VR experiences to it. It's releasing controllers finally, which have that kind of allow for that high-end VR experience. As well as being able to use like PlayStation controllers and Xbox controllers to kind of drive those experiences, where originally it was mostly about using your hands and eye tracking to be able to control the experiences, which obviously wasn't going to meet the needs of high-end VR games, but it is starting to push more into that VR space. Whereas I said the Pimax Crystal Super is really focused on the PC VR experience, about making the Steam VR being the prime example, making those gaming experiences just as good as they can possibly be. Anyway, so in this video, I'm going to run through a side-by-side comparison of the specifications between the two variants of the Pimax Crystal Super. So you've got one variant, which is the QLED, and then you've got another variant, which is a micro OLED. So there's two slight variations that you can buy. They're actually interchangeable lenses, but I'll go into that more in a second. So I'm going to go through the specs of those two and put them against the specs of the Apple Vision Pro, talk you through the differences between the two and what they actually mean from a tech perspective. And hopefully, because the Apple Vision Pro is just starting to kind of come out now, it's been out in America for a while, since I think Feb 2nd, but it has only just now started to roll out into other markets like Australia. So it's starting to kind of become more accessible to a lot of people, whereas the Pimax Crystal Super is due out at the end of the year, or Q4 2024 is the current window of release. So hopefully they stick to that. So one is just about out now and one is coming in the future. And as you're about to find out, there's a big price difference between them, but is there a big specs difference between them? All right, let's dive into that comparison. Okay, well, let's start with the basics. And if you weren't aware of those two pictures that you can see there, the one on the left is the Apple Vision Pro and the Pimax Crystal Super is the one on the right. Now, release date wise, like I said, the Apple Vision Pro came out in February 2 this year, but that was in very select markets. I think it might have even just been the US, and has since started to roll out elsewhere. So it's just arrived here in Australia, I believe, as of late July, and quite a few other territories. So it's kind of now around mid-year 2024 that you could possibly call it a genuine global launch, or at least global availability. Now, when we look at the price, the the US price for the Pimax Crystal Super is $17.99, so that's the QLED model. And if you step it up to micro OLED, it's an extra $200 there for $19.99. Now, that's a fair bit cheaper, significantly cheaper than the Apple Vision Pro, which, look, it's an Apple product. Apple always cashes in. Usually it's got the tech to back it up, to be fair. And it's from US $3,499. And that's because there are a couple of different storage capacities involved, which we'll go through in a little bit. Now, when it comes to controllers, the price that you're paying for the Pimax Crystal Super does include controllers, and the Apple Vision Pro price does not. Now, as I mentioned before, there are some controllers that are in development. They're not actually first party, they're third party controllers by Surreal Interactive. And I believe the early bird price for those is $250 US, so they're not cheap. But that will give you a couple of controllers which aren't massively advanced, but they're kind of similar to the MetaQuest Pro controllers. Yeah, definitely look like they're inspired by MetaQuest. So you will be able to get some controllers, but either way, they're not included in that price. Now, in terms of the operating system, the Pimax Crystal Super is going to, there's obviously their own Pimax store. We see this HTC has a store as well, you know, MetaQuest has its store. But Steam VR is going to be the main operating system you're going to use. That's where you're going to play all your games through that. And Apple, on the other hand, is using its own Apple OS. Not a big surprise there, the Vision OS. It's the first time they've ever done anything in the kind of like an operating system directly for AR and VR. And look, you're probably either one way or the other when it comes to Apple devices on what you think of their iOS versus say Android, or Windows when it comes to the desktop market. Yeah, the Vision OS it's got a lot of touchstones which you would be familiar with if you've ever used iOS, basically, just in a physical spatial space. And you'll see that appearing on some of the trailers I've got running. So that'll give you an idea. Now, you can use Steam VR with the Apple Vision Pro if you go and get the correct, basically link cables to wirelessly play Steam VR through your Apple Vision Pro. In fact, you can go as far as setting up base stations and using index controllers or HTC controllers to actually play VR through Steam VR. So Steam VR is kind of a functional operating system with Apple Vision Pro, but it takes a bit of effort to get there, and it's definitely not the native OS. Okay, so let's jump into the visual side of things. This is where stuff gets really interesting, especially when you consider that the price difference is so significant. So in terms of the lenses that have been used, so the QLED model of the Crystal Super is using aspheric glass, and the micro OLED, and it's OLED on the Apple Vision Pro as well, is using pancake glass as their lens technology. Now the difference there is that the aspheric glass basically lets more light through, so you get less distortion, less light loss in the image that's getting transferred across to the user experience, but it weighs more. Whereas pancake's a lighter material to use, but then also doesn't let light come through as well. So it's obviously a bit more complex on how I'm putting it right there. But obviously the Apple Vision Pro is, well, not obviously, but Apple Vision Pro is a bit more of a wireless device, so weight's going to be a bit more of a play there, but obviously it has something to do with the OLED as well there, because those are the two OLED models, and it's sticking with pancake, where it's QLED, which is bumping up, oh, I don't know, depends who you talk to, has transitioned to aspheric glass. Now let's check out that resolution, because that's cool. So 3840 by 3840, so almost 4K per eye on the Crystal Super, which is amazing, possibly best in class. I'm not sure if I've heard of anyone who's got higher than that at the moment. It's outstanding resolution. Now the Apple Vision Pro is no mug, 3660 by 3200 pixel resolution there, but it's less. And that's definitely worth bringing up. If you're focused on the VR aspect here, and we're going to go into just a little bit more, or I've kind of spoken to you about it already, but how Apple Vision Pro is really looking more towards that AR market and that productivity market and that kind of mixed reality landscape a bit more than, say, where the Crystal Super is, which is going specifically focusing on the VR. So Apple Vision Pro can do VR, but it can do a lot of other things and is potentially more interested in doing other things, whereas the Crystal Super is right down the barrel of the VR gun. And if you're also doing sim racing, sim flight games, really into your VR, then that's a key point, and especially when you look at the price. So how that breaks out into kind of the amount of pixels you're going to get, it's 29.5 million on the Crystal Super versus the 23 million of the Vision Pro. So it's a significant difference. And we also see that in the peak pixel density. So that's actually how many kind of pixels you're actually getting in a specific space. So the higher the better, right? The higher the more clarity is. Now, I've got 57. What all the Pimax is saying at the moment is that it'll be between 50 and 57, which is their PPD. Point here is it's significantly more than the 34 offered by the Apple Vision Pro. So which either way you go, it's going to be a significant bump up in terms of the amount of pixels, the resolution, and the pixel density itself. That's all pointing towards a better visual experience in a like-for-like comparison. Let's say you played Half-Life Alyx on both games, it's going to look better in the Crystal Super. That's what this is telling us. It's also worth mentioning it's an interchangeable lens on the Pimax Crystal Super, so you can actually get the QLED model and swap in the micro OLED if you want to switch between the two based on whatever particular experience you're having and which one's going to be best for that experience. But that's going really niche. Now following on with the visuals here, refresh rate. So again, we've got a bit of a buff there on the QLED model, 120 Hertz, that's good. That's kind of, you know, the standards we'd expect, say, as a minimum standard nowadays on your next generation console gaming. To get that in the VR experience, 120 Hertz, lovely. The Apple Vision Pro and the Crystal Super, the OLED, they're playing a role, but that's 90 Hertz and 100 Hertz, a little bit more comparable, but definitely a nudge there to the Crystal Super QLED. Now, field of view, very, very interesting. So 130 degrees horizontal. You'll see field of view referenced in many different ways across the headsets. They'll always, there's horizontal, there's vertical, there's diagonal, lots of different measurements, so make sure you're trying to do a like-for-like comparison when you get there. But also, field of view, I've seen it be software-based as well. I've played games where the field of view is constricted on you while they're trying to play the game like artificially by the software. So it's a bit of a, look, it's a maximum, right? So best case scenario, you're getting 130 degrees horizontal, which in a QLED, significantly more than you're going to get in the Apple Vision Pro. They haven't announced it specifically for this Crystal Super Micro OLED. I believe it's going to be somewhere closer to that 110 mark, somewhere between 100 and 110, just because it's the Micro LED screen is going to play a bit of a role there. But you'll see the little star next to the FOV. That's because the 110 degrees has been actually a third party has done the testing to find out that figure. So Apple didn't announce it, but since it's in the public space, people have been able to get in, do the maths, work it out, and that's kind of where they've landed. About somewhere between 100 and 120, they put 110 there in this comparison. Either way, less than the QLED and probably on par with the Crystal Super Micro OLED. So IPD difference, you got a bit more flexibility with Apple Vision Pro, so that's basically going to allow you to change the proximity of the lenses to each other to basically fit whatever your eye distance happens to be. Yeah, it's a pretty fair range on both of them, but if you're really on the extremities, the Apple Vision Pro is the one that's going to most likely work for you. And as I mentioned before, you can do interchangeable lenses with the Crystal Super headsets, but not with the Vision Pro. Okay, let's jump into tracking. So the tracking method, look, they're both using 6 degrees of freedom. They're both using inside-out camera-based tracking. The Steam VR option I've got in brackets there for the Crystal Super range basically refers to the fact that you can buy an attachment that will allow your Crystal Super to work with the base stations. If you've already got that, potentially you got it through the Valve Index, potentially you got it through the HTC Vive. That's just going to give you a little bit extra tracking or more accurate tracking if you've got that set up, but you don't need it. You can just go, just put them on and don't set up anything and go for your life. Apple Vision Pro, same 6 degrees of freedom, same inside out, but a few more sensors in work here. Depth sensor, LiDAR being the two that really stood out for me. And that's going to really play into its mixed reality experiences here, just knowing that kind of proximity between you and the objects that are sitting against the real world that's around you, as opposed to in a virtual world like you're going to get with a full VR experience. Now, camera count, very interesting. So 4 on the two crystals, but 12 on the Apple Vision Pro, and they're all doing different things as well. A pass-through is a huge part of the Apple Vision Pro experience, so that plays into it. And as you'll see further down there, face and hand tracking is a big part of that experience as well. So they've all got eye tracking, so they'll see where your eyes go, and they'll foveated rendering, which basically means that it's going to render the image. It can see where you're looking, and then render the image in full res where you're looking and downsize the res basically where you're not looking dynamically in real time to basically save on resources and allow for a smoother experience. So they've all got that, that's sweet, but only the Apple Vision Pro also brings in face and hand tracking. Now the reason is the Pimax Crystal Super comes with actual controllers that you hold in your hands, and it's super focused on that PC VR experience where you'll be using either those controllers or potentially you've paired up a PlayStation or an Xbox controller to play games. Less so about just using your hands. Whereas the Apple Vision Pro does not have controllers, and your controller is your hand. So you're moving your finger to push a button, you're moving your fingers to pinch and unpinch. It can read your face in terms of like communication apps and so forth. So that's where those 12 cameras are also playing a role. There's a lot more going in there in terms of the tracking. And now you can probably see why I said, you know, sometimes that Apple tech just justifies the price. I'd say the Apple tech in general is definitely really good quality and it's up there. It's potentially not as far advanced as the price would sometimes suggest, but you can start to see now where you're getting some more stuff from the extra money that you're spending, if that's useful to your user case. Now, there is some information in the build in here, just so we can have a talk about the Apple Vision Pro, just to help explain a bit more about that price. Because the Crystal Super headsets, while I'm sure they're not completely brain dead vacant things, there'll be stuff in there, but it's not really applicable. Because what you're doing is you're doing a PC VR experience. So what's really driving that VR is your PC or your laptop, which is going to have to be pretty high end. So you can't get away with an old or average PC when you want to run high end VR games. At least if you want to run them at hot full spec with everything going on, you're going to need to spend some money there. You're going to probably have to spend more money than the gap between the two devices, to be fair. Chances are you've already got that, so it's not a new expense. But so anyway, not applicable. Apple Vision Pro, on the other hand, it's doing all of that in device because it's wireless. So Crystal Super, not wireless. Apple Vision Pro, wireless. So all that computing's on board. And they've really jammed it. So you got an octa-core Apple M2, so 4 3.5 gigahertz chips and processors and 4 2.4 gigahertz processors. So that's on board, plus an Apple R1 chip, which is kind of I believe it's their new chip, which is to help driving Vision OS basically. And it's also got the GPU, so it's got a 10-core Apple M2 GPU as well. Now, if you haven't used the M2, and there's an M3 out now as well from Apple, they are freaking amazing. They are really, really good chips. And I'm working on some content at the moment. I've been using an Apple M2 laptop for the last year, and it's still it's kicking the butt on my desktop, to be fair. So the M2 and the M3, Apple have got a really, really good chip on their hands. It does some amazing stuff. That's pretty impressive that they've got that on device. Also got 16 gigabytes of RAM, and as I mentioned earlier, you got 3 different storage options, which is going to play into that base price. It's not stored on a PC. You're playing it off the device itself. Now, as mentioned previously, you can get with a bit of fooling around and a dongle and so forth, get Steam VR to work wirelessly through the Apple Vision Pro. The wireless stuff, yeah, it's not so great. It works, but it's not as good as being wired for obvious reasons, and it's probably not going to be as good as being playing a game or an experience that's off device with the Apple Vision Pro. And finally, let's have a look at some of these other features. Wireless mode, as I mentioned, there's no wireless on the Pimax Crystal Super. They've stripped it right back to PC VR. They're going right for that hardcore PC VR audience who are looking for the next best iteration in terms of resolution and visual experience. So no wireless there. Apple Vision Pro is wireless, technically, but it does have a battery pack attached to it. So you are going to have a cable that connects to a battery pack, which you're going to have somewhere on your person or sitting nearby. So either in your pocket, if you're moving around, playing a game that's got you on your feet, or sitting on the table next to you if you're not playing a game, more productivity based, or watching a movie, or doing all those other cool things that you can do in Apple Vision Pro. Then you're going to have this battery pack, and that battery pack is going to give you 2 hours of life. So it's a short journey, just enough to watch a movie really before you need to charge it up. Yes, you can get a little tangled in it if you don't set it up properly or don't watch yourself. So that's something to keep in note. So wireless, kind of. With the audio, they've all got integrated audio. Look, I'm sure there's going to be a difference in the quality between the two, but it is in headset stereo audio, spatial audio that's going to be just pushed into your ears from the headset. So that's the experience you're going to have there. And weight-wise, it's interesting, you'll see I've got less than 845 grams. So 845 grams was the weight of the Pimax Crystal QLED. So there's the light, there's the Super, which is coming out this year, but it was already in the market, just a middle of the range, which is the Pimax Crystal QLED, and that weighs 845 grams. And we've been told that the Crystal Super will weigh less than that, but not by how much. So it'll be less than 845 grams, whereas the Apple Vision Pro comes in at a much more svelte 650 grams, which is pretty incredible, like really to get it to that weight with everything going on in there. But that doesn't include the battery pack that you're also going to have to hold on you. So that's going to bring that up to just over 1 kilo with the battery. Now, it is worth noting that at 845 grams for the Pimax Crystal Super doesn't include the PCR cable. So that's obviously coming off the back of the device and heading to your PC. That's going to have a bit of weight to it as well, so it's going to add it up a little bit. So they're probably going to be more or less comparable once you take everything into account. So there you go, guys. There's a comparison between the Pimax Crystal Super and the Apple Vision Pro. So two really strong entries into the virtual reality and I guess augmented reality in the case of Apple Vision Pro headset space, but yeah, big investment to get into it. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about what the two are offering and what might be right for you, but definitely keep an eye on the channel because I'm hoping to get both products in my hands and I will put up full detailed reviews as soon as I am able to. All right, I'm Chris Stead. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll check you later.